The temperature was so extreme that the soldiers died merely by approaching. 7 times hotter than normal. This was the fate prepared for 3 young men who refused to bow before a statue. But what happened inside that furnace has no human explanation. Because when the king looked into the flames, he did not see 3 bodies burning. He saw 4 men walking. This story is recorded in the book of Daniel, chapter 3. And what it reveals goes far beyond a miracle of survival. It exposes what happens when human faith meets the divine presence in the most improbable place possible, in the center of the fire. But before understanding what happened inside the furnace, you must understand what led those 3 men to it, because no one reaches such a moment by chance. There is a path, and that path begins years earlier, in a destroyed city and in a people torn from their land. Have you ever stopped to think about what it means to lose everything at once? Not just material goods, not just your home, but your identity, your nation, your temple, your God being apparently defeated before the gods of another people. This was exactly what happened to the Jews when Nebuchadnezzar II invaded Jerusalem. The year was 586 before Christ. The Babylonian army besieged the city for months. Famine spread. The walls fell. Solomon's temple, built with the most precious materials of the ancient world, was looted and destroyed. The sacred treasures were taken as trophies, and along with them thousands of people. Among the deportees were young men of the Jewish nobility. Nebuchadnezzar's strategy was clear. Take the best, the most intelligent, the most promising, and transform them into Babylonians. Erase their culture, replace their faith, make them forget where they came from. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were among them. Their names were changed, their clothes were changed, their diet was changed. Everything that connected them to their origin was systematically removed. Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, Azariah became Abednego. Even the names they carried that referenced the God of Israel were replaced by names that honored Babylonian deities. But there is something that no empire can change: conviction. And it is precisely regarding conviction that many people know this story only on the surface. They know that 3 young men were thrown into the fire and survived, but few understand the spiritual depth of what truly happened there, what that furnace signified, what that statue represented, and primarily who that 4th man was who appeared in the midst of the flames. There is a dimension of this narrative that connects directly with the words that Jesus pronounced centuries later, words that shook Jerusalem, words that reveal the same God who walked in that furnace. If you want to deepen this connection between the Old and the New Testament, I have prepared a digital book called The 7 Last Words of Jesus That Shook Jerusalem. In it, you will discover the hidden meaning behind each phrase that Christ pronounced on the cross and how they connect with the entire history of redemption. To access it right now, it is very simple. Look, a square code is appearing on your screen at this moment. Take your cell phone, open the camera app, and point it at this code. A link will appear automatically. Just tap it, and you will be directed to the digital books page. If you prefer, the link is also in the description of this video. If you are on your cell phone, tap the video title or the More option, and the full description will appear. If you are on a computer or television, the link is just below the video. Thousands of people are already deepening their faith through this reading. And when you access it, you also help keep this channel active to continue bringing content like this. Access it now and then come back here to continue this story. Comment Amen below if you believe that God still walks with his own in the midst of the fire. Now returning to Babylon. The years passed. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood out. Their skills were undeniable. Their wisdom surpassed that of the magicians and astrologers of the kingdom. They were promoted, gained positions of influence, and administered entire provinces. But they never abandoned their faith, and it was exactly this that created the conflict. Nebuchadnezzar II was a man of extremes. His empire extended across territories that today correspond to Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, and parts of Egypt. He commanded an army of more than 200,000 soldiers. He built the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon, considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. His capital was surrounded by walls so wide that chariots could pass over them. But all this power was not enough. He wanted more than political obedience. He wanted worship. And that was how the statue came to be. The biblical text describes its dimensions: 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. In current measurements, this is equivalent to approximately 27 meters high by 2 meters and 70 centimeters wide. Imagine that. A structure of solid gold taller than a 9-story building, erected in the middle of a plain called Dura, in the province of Babylon. How much gold was necessary to build something like that? Scholars estimate that, even if it were plated and not solid, the amount of gold involved would represent today the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars. It was an absurd demonstration of wealth, power, and ego. But the most impressive thing was not the statue itself. It was the order that accompanied it. Nebuchadnezzar summoned all the officials of the kingdom: satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the authorities of the provinces. Thousands of people gathered before the statue, and then a herald proclaimed the royal order in a loud voice. At the moment, the music played, and there were 6 specific instruments mentioned in the text: the trumpet, the flute, the harp, the lyre, the psaltery, and the bagpipe. Everyone was to prostrate themselves and worship the golden image, without exception, all peoples, nations, and languages. And the consequence for whoever refused? To be cast immediately into a furnace of blazing fire. There was no trial. There was no appeal. There was no mercy. The sentence was instantaneous and public, a spectacle of terror to ensure total obedience. The music played. Thousands prostrated themselves, but 3 men remained standing. Can you fathom the pressure of that moment? Think of the scenario: a crowded plain, thousands of people with their faces on the ground, the sound of the instruments echoing, the soldiers watching. And in the middle of all that bowed crowd, 3 upright figures, visible, exposed, alone. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not hiding. They did not try to camouflage themselves. They did not pretend to bow only to stand up later. They simply stood, knowing they would be seen, knowing they would be denounced, knowing the furnace was lit. And that was exactly what happened. Some Chaldeans approached the king. The biblical text uses an interesting expression to describe the accusation: they devoured the Jews with their words. It was a denunciation laden with envy. After all, those 3 foreigners occupied positions that many Babylonians desired. That was the perfect opportunity to destroy them. They told the king that there were Jewish men, appointed by him to administer the province, who did not respect his order. They did not serve the Babylonian gods. They did not worship the golden statue. They publicly defied the royal authority. Nebuchadnezzar's reaction was immediate: rage and fury. The text does not hide the intensity of the king's emotion. He ordered the 3 to be brought before him. But here an important detail arises. Even furious, Nebuchadnezzar offers a second chance. He asks directly if it is true that they do not serve his gods nor worship the statue. And he gives a new opportunity. If they prostrate themselves when the music plays again, they will be spared. And then the king asks a question that traverses the centuries: and who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? It was a question of defiance, of arrogance, of absolute power. Nebuchadnezzar did not believe there was any force capable of opposing his will. He had conquered nations, toppled kingdoms, destroyed temples. In his mind, no god had managed to protect his people from Babylon. Why would the God of those 3 be different? The answer he received left him in shock. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not ask for time to think. They did not consult one another. They did not hesitate. The answer came direct, clear, and devastatingly courageous. They said they did not need to defend themselves before the king in that matter. If the God they served wanted to, he was capable of delivering them from the blazing furnace. He would deliver them from the king's hands. But they did not stop there. The following sentence is one of the most powerful declarations of faith in the entire Bible. But if not, even if God did not deliver them, even if the furnace consumed them, even if that were the last day of their lives, still they would not serve the king's gods nor worship the golden statue. Do you understand the weight of this? They were not bargaining with God. They were not making a deal like, if you save me, I will be faithful. Their faith did not depend on the result. It was not conditioned on the miracle. They would serve God regardless of what happened. This is not common faith. This is absolute faith. And it was exactly this response that transformed the king's rage into uncontrolled fury. The text says that Nebuchadnezzar's countenance was changed against them. His expression shifted. His blood rose. The decision was made. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times more than normal. 7 times. Think of the implication of this. A furnace that was already capable of instantly killing anyone who entered it would now be pushed to the extreme limit of what the technology of the time allowed. The objective was not just to execute, it was to annihilate, to leave no trace, to turn those 3 men into ashes before they could even feel pain. Nebuchadnezzar ordered the strongest men in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were tied with their own clothes, cloaks, tunics, hats, and other garments, completely immobilized, completely vulnerable. And then they were taken to the furnace. What happened next reveals the lethal intensity of that fire. The soldiers carrying the 3 young men approached the entrance of the furnace to cast them in, but the heat was so extreme, so absurdly intense, that the flames killed them before they could even complete the task. Trained men, experienced warriors, the strongest of the army, killed instantly by the simple act of approaching. How is it possible that 3 bound young men survived something like that? This is exactly the question that Nebuchadnezzar himself asked moments later. The bodies of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell into the furnace, bound, condemned, apparently without any chance of survival. The king watched from a safe distance, probably expecting to see the end of those who dared to defy him. But then something happened, something that changed his facial expression from vindictive satisfaction to absolute astonishment. Nebuchadnezzar rose up suddenly. The text says he was astonished, amazed, and turning to his counselors, he asked a question that reveals his total confusion. "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" "Yes," they answered, 3 men, bound, condemned. But the king saw something else. "Look, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like a son of the gods." 4 men, loose, walking, without harm, and the 4th with a divine appearance. Each element of this vision contradicts everything that should have happened. They should have been dead before even touching the floor of the furnace. They should have been consumed in seconds. They should be ashes. But not only were they alive, they were free. The ropes that bound them had disappeared, and they were not desperate, trying to escape. They were walking, strolling, as if the fire did not exist. And there was someone with them. Who was the 4th man? This question traverses millennia of biblical interpretation. Nebuchadnezzar himself, a pagan king who worshipped multiple gods, described that figure as someone like a son of the gods. He did not have the theological vocabulary to understand what he saw, but he recognized it was not human. Some traditions interpret this figure as an angel sent by God to protect the 3 young men. And indeed, later in the text, the king himself mentions that God sent his angel to deliver his servants. This interpretation is valid and respectable, but there is another reading. Many scholars see in this appearance a theophany, a visible manifestation of God. More specifically, a Christophany, an appearance of the pre-incarnate Christ, the Son of God before being born in Bethlehem, manifesting himself in the Old Testament to walk with those who trusted in him. It was not just protection from a distance. It was presence in the midst of the fire. Now think of the transformation that happened to Nebuchadnezzar at that moment. Minutes before, he asked with arrogance which god could deliver someone from his hands. Now he approaches the entrance of the furnace, the same furnace that killed his soldiers, and calls for the 3 young men. But observe how he calls them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Servants of the Most High God. The same king who demanded worship of his statue now recognizes that there is a God above all. The pride that made him defy any deity now bows before the undeniable evidence of a superior power. And when the 3 came out of the furnace, what happened next was witnessed by all the officials of the kingdom who were present. Satraps, prefects, governors, and counselors approached to examine those men. The biblical text is meticulous in describing what they verified. The fire had no power over their bodies. Not a hair of their heads was singed. Their clothes were not altered, and, an impressive detail, Not even the smell of smoke was on them. Have you ever been near a bonfire? Even at a distance, the smell clings. It stays in the clothes, the hair, the skin. Now imagine being inside a furnace heated 7 times more than normal and coming out without any smell of smoke. The miracle was not just surviving, it was coming out completely untouched, as if the fire had never existed. It was not partial protection, it was absolute protection. And it is exactly this absolute protection that remains available today. The same God who entered the furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is the God who promised never to abandon his own. Jesus said, "Lo, I am with you always." If you are going through a furnace now, be it a financial crisis, a health problem, a destroyed relationship, a spiritual struggle, there is someone who wants to walk with you in the midst of that fire. The digital book, The 7 Last Words of Jesus That Shook Jerusalem, reveals how Christ demonstrated this faithful presence until his last breath on the cross. Each word he pronounced carries a profound meaning that can transform the way you face your own furnaces. Point your cell phone camera at the code on the screen, or access the link in the video description. When you access it, you also help this channel continue producing content like this. Now let us continue. Nebuchadnezzar's reaction to the miracle was immediate and public. He did not try to hide what happened. He did not minimize it. He did not seek alternative explanations. Before all the authorities of his empire, he declared, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him, and they frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God." It was a public admission of defeat, the greatest king in the world recognizing that his power had limits, that there was an authority above his own, that those 3 young foreigners exiled without an army, without resources, without political influence, had defeated the most powerful empire on earth simply because they trusted in their God. But Nebuchadnezzar went further. He issued an official decree. He determined that any person of any people, nation, or language who spoke any blasphemy against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would be cut in pieces, and their house would be made a dunghill. The justification was clear. There is no other God who can deliver in this way. The king who built a statue to be worshipped was now issuing decrees protecting the name of the God of Israel. The inversion is complete, and it did not end there. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who should have been dead, were promoted. They gained even higher positions in the administration of the province of Babylon. The same men who were denounced by envious people now occupied positions superior to those of their accusers. The furnace that should have been the end became the beginning of something greater. But there is an even deeper dimension to this story that often goes unnoticed, and it has to do with what the fire burned. Remember that the 3 young men were bound before being cast into the furnace. Tight ropes, firm knots. They had no way to free themselves. They were completely immobilized. When Nebuchadnezzar looked into the fire, what did he see? 4 men loose. The ropes had disappeared, burned, destroyed, but the bodies remained intact. The fire consumed only that which bound them. It destroyed only that which limited them. It burned only that which prevented freedom. There is a powerful spiritual metaphor here. How many times do you enter a furnace bound? Bound by fear, bound by doubts, bound by guilt, bound by patterns you cannot break, bound by toxic relationships, bound by addictions, bound by words people said about you that you internalized as truth. And when the fire comes, because the fire always comes, you think you will be destroyed. But perhaps, just perhaps, the fire did not come to destroy you. It came to burn the ropes. The problem is that sometimes we get so used to the bonds that we don't even realize we are trapped. We carry the ropes with us as if they were part of who we are, and only when the fire comes do we discover that there is a freedom we did not know. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego entered the furnace bound. They came out free. What are you carrying that the fire needs to burn? Another detail that deserves attention is the moment the 4th man appeared. He was not there before. He did not appear in the palace. He did not appear during the confrontation with the king. He did not appear while they were being bound. He did not appear while they were being carried to the furnace. He appeared inside the fire. There are people waiting for God to appear before the problem, for him to prevent the furnace from being lit, for him to change the king's heart before the sentence, for him to open an escape route before the fire begins. But sometimes God does not appear before. He appears inside. This does not mean he was absent before. It means there are manifestations of the divine presence that only happen in the midst of the fire. Revelations that are only possible when you are surrounded by flames. Encounters that only occur when there is no longer any human way out. Nebuchadnezzar did not see the fourth man outside the furnace. He saw him inside. Perhaps you are in the middle of a furnace right now, surrounded, with no visible way out, and you are wondering where God is, why he did not prevent this, why he allowed you to get here. Look again. Perhaps he is not on the outside trying to get you out. Perhaps he is in there, walking with you. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego also raises a question about faith and certainty. When they answered the king, they said that God was capable of delivering them, but they added, but if not. They did not have certainty of the result. They did not know if they would be saved or if they would die burned. They did not have a prophecy guaranteeing deliverance. They did not have an angel whispering that everything would be fine. They had faith, and faith is not certainty of the result. Faith is trust in the person of God regardless of the result. This distinction is crucial. Many people confuse faith with a guarantee. They think that having faith means knowing that everything will work out the way they want. But that is not faith. That is a demand. That is a condition. That is saying to God, I trust you as long as you do what I expect. The faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was different. It was a faith that said, we know you can, but even if you don't, you are still our God. How many people abandon faith because God did not do what they expected? How many turn away because the healing did not come, the job did not appear, the relationship was not restored, the loved one did not survive? These three young men teach us something essential. Faith does not depend on the miracle. The miracle depends on God. Faith depends on us. And sometimes, the greatest demonstration of faith is to remain standing when everyone bows, even without knowing if you will come out of the furnace alive. There is yet another aspect of this narrative that is rarely explored, the testimony. Imagine how many people witnessed what happened that day. The text mentions that all the officials of the provinces were gathered. Satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, representatives from the entire Babylonian Empire. They saw the three refuse to bow. They saw the king's fury. They saw the furnace heated 7 times more. They saw the soldiers die upon approaching. They saw the three cast into the fire. And they saw the fourth man. They saw the three come out without a single hair burned. They heard the king's decree recognizing the God of Israel. Imagine the impact of this. Thousands of people from different peoples, nations, and languages witnessing something that had no natural explanation, returning to their provinces with this story, telling their families, spreading the account of the God who walks in the fire. The refusal of 3 young men to bow generated a testimony that reached the entire empire. Sometimes your furnace is not just about you. It is about everyone who is watching. It is about the testimony that will arise when you come out of the fire intact. The people who will hear your story, the skeptics who will have no way to explain it, the enemies who will be silenced, those who were waiting for your fall and will see your promotion. Nebuchadnezzar did not just recognize the God of Israel. He issued a decree protecting that name throughout his empire. The resistance of 3 became legislation for millions. Never underestimate the impact of what you are living. And what happened to the 3 young men afterward? The biblical text does not give many details about the rest of their lives. We know they were promoted. We know they continued serving in the Babylonian administration. We know that Daniel, their companion, continued in a position of influence for decades, traversing different reigns. But their legacy is not in the positions they held. It is in the story they left behind. Thousands of years later, in practically any place in the world, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego continues to be told. Children learn about the blazing furnace. Adults find courage in this narrative when they face their own furnaces. Preachers proclaim the message of the fourth man. Artists paint the scene. Writers retell it. A decision of a few seconds, to remain standing while everyone bowed, echoed for millennia. And it continues to echo. Because every time someone chooses to remain faithful to God in the face of extreme pressure, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego repeats itself, not with the same literal furnace, but with the same spiritual principle, the same choice, the same faith, and often the same mysterious presence that appears in the midst of the fire. How does this connect with the New Testament? When Jesus was crucified, he experienced his own furnace, not of literal fire, but of pain, abandonment, mockery, and death. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he sweated drops of blood, anticipating what was to come. On the cross, he cried out, asking why the Father had forsaken him. But there is a crucial difference. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had the presence of someone with them in the fire. Jesus faced the cross alone. Why? So that you would never have to face your furnace alone. The abandonment that Christ experienced on the cross was so that you could have the promise, "I will never leave you, nor forsake you." The loneliness he endured was so that you could have eternal company. The death he suffered was so that the fourth man could walk with you in any fire you face. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is not just an Old Testament account. It is an anticipation of what Christ would do for everyone. He entered the greatest furnace in human history, the judgment for the sins of the world, so that you could have someone walking by your side in any fire. Centuries later, Jesus said, "Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world." The one who walked in the furnace beside 3 Hebrew youths is the same one who promises to walk beside you today. No matter the size of the fire, no matter the intensity of the heat, no matter how many times the temperature increases, the presence that protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not stay trapped in that era. It traverses time. The furnace was not the end of their story. It was the chapter that revealed who was with them all along. And perhaps that is exactly what you need to remember now. You are not alone. You never were. And if this story touched your heart, I want to invite you to take one more step in your spiritual journey. The digital book, The 7 Last Words of Jesus That Shook Jerusalem, will take you even deeper into this encounter with Christ. Each word that Jesus pronounced on the cross carries a transforming power. And when you understand the meaning behind each of them, your faith gains a completely new dimension. Take your cell phone now, open the camera and point it at the square code appearing on the screen. When the link appears, just tap it. In seconds, you will have access to the book. If you are on your cell phone watching this video, tap the title or the More option to open the full description. The link is there. If you are on a computer or television, look just below the video. The link is visible. When you access the digital book, you are also helping this channel to continue existing. Each access allows us to continue producing content like this, taking the Word of God to more people. The fourth man walked with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the midst of the fire. He wants to walk with you too. Access it now and comment Amen below if you believe that God is still present in the furnaces of your life.